The fate of this young man, who was shot for desertion during World War II, is a prime example of what can happen if you find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time. Edward Slavik was an ordinary petty thief, whom the police arrested and sent to jail several times. It is notable that the offender was convicted only for theft and did not commit any crimes against a person. As a criminal, Slavik was not subject to conscription, but fate played a rather cruel joke with him. During the whole year, the young man did not fall into the hands of law enforcement officers, so his unfitness was removed, and Slavik was sent to the front as part of expeditionary corps. After landing in Normandy, the course in which Slavik served continued to move forward. However, the young man, like many others, when he first got to the front, was shocked by what was happening around him. Even modern Hollywood, showing the landing process, was forced to depict in artistic manner the horror of what was really happening. When landing ships were destroyed by direct hits of shells, and the infantrymen who did reach the shore fell by the dozens on the beach, hit by machine gun fire. The psychological shock of Slavik was so strong that he decided to run away. It is noteworthy that the deserter quite successfully hid in France for about a month and a half, until he was detained by a military patrol. However, for the first time, the unlucky fugitive was not punished but simply taken to his unit. There, Slavik honestly stated that he was simply afraid and asked to be sent to serve in some rare unit. However, the command of the unit decided otherwise, sending a private to a rifle company. That is, in fact, at the very edge of the attack. Naturally, Slavik ran a second time. This time, after the capture, he had to appear before the court of a military tribunal. The story of the escape itself is interesting. Slavik fled for the second time on October 7, 1944. Initially, the captain caught up with him and asked to return, but the private refused. Later, having met the cook of one of the units, Slavik handed him a note in which he explained the consequences of his act. The cook called representatives of the military police, who for a long time persuaded Slavik to tear the note, but the young man did not agree. Moreover, he complied with the requirements of the police and wrote another note in which he indicated that he perfectly understood all the consequences that his decision to desert could lead to. And here it is necessary to make a small digression. Under American law, during the fighting, even failure to comply with an order was punishable by death. So it was in theory. But in practice, the situation was quite different. Speaking specifically about the Second World War, more than 20,000 cases of desertion were recorded in the American Army. Almost all deserters were convicted by a military tribunal, of which only 48 were sentenced to death. In total, 102 death sentences were carried out during the Second World War, and the convicts were accused of criminal offenses and crimes against the person, robbery, looting, or rape. During the investigation of the case, the military interrogator, having decided that the young man had simply come into conflict with his officer, offered Slavik a transfer to another unit. This would have ended the whole incident, but the deserter categorically refused to fight, regardless of any persuasion. Therefore, in fact, reluctantly, the young man was put on a trial by a military tribunal. And here we need to return to what was said above. Up to this point, not a single death sentence had been carried out against deserters. Therefore, Slavik was firmly convicted that for the first time he would receive only a few years in prison, to which he was quite accustomed. However, fate decreed otherwise. It played against Slavik, because at that time the number of deserters in the US Army was quite large. As already mentioned, not everyone could normally perceive what was happening, calmly look at the bodies of their dead comrades, and see rivers of blood. Moreover, just at that time, the famous offensive operation Battle for the Ardennes was being prepared. The 28th Division, in which Slavik was listed, was to advance in the Herdgen Forest. Naturally, all the soldiers and officers of the division knew perfectly well the approximate date of the offensive and understood that the losses would be colossal. Moreover, the landing in Normandy was still preserved in memory of soldiers. And here again, fate turned its back on Slavik. On the eve of the offensive, rumors began to be actively circulated among the soldiers that it was better to get several years in prison than to die ingloriously during the offensive. The military police estimated that at least 0.5% of the entire division was ready to desert and go to prison. Amidst such sentiments, some kind of a vivid action was urgently needed. Unfortunately, this action was the trial of a deserter, Private Edward Slavic. It also turned out to be an unfortunate coincidence that all the officers of the 28th Division could not be present at the trial, as they were in their units and were prepared for the offensive. During the trial by the prosecutor, Captain John Green, witnesses were presented who confirmed Slavic's intentions to flee. Moreover, Slavic told them this absolutely openly and without hiding. The defendant himself refused to testify. As a result, a panel of 9 judges sentenced the unlucky deserter to death. Edward Slavic was absolutely shocked by the verdict. Instead of expected prison, he was threatened with a very real death penalty. The private was in a state of shock and naturally sent a petition for clemency to Commander General Dwight Eisenhower. But fate again turned away from Slavic. The Battle of the Ardennes was already unfolding, and it did not unfold at all as the command planned. Along with huge losses, several battalions of American troops were surrounded. Rumors of failures at the front automatically led to a desire to run rather than fight. Moreover, we repeat, for the frontline soldiers, the prison term seemed not such a terrible thing in comparison with the bloody meat grinder that was going on in the offensive. Therefore, Dwight Eisenhower, for the first time since the American Civil War of the 19th century, confirmed the death sentence on December 23, 1944, for Private Edward Slavic. Interestingly, even at the time of the consideration of petition for clemency, many military men were categorically against the approval of the death sentence, saying that this would damage the image of the army and make it very difficult to recruit soldiers for service. However, the general was adamant. It just so happened that it was at this moment that a strong factor was needed to show that deserters had to be shot. Perhaps this added strength to the troops, but the spirit undoubtedly suffered. The sentence was carried out on January 31, 1945, near the village of St. Marie-aux-Mines. While Slavic was tied with straps to a post, he managed to say to the soldier who was preparing the deserter for execution, "They don't shoot me for deserting the U.S. Army. Thousands of guys have done the same. They just need to make an example out of someone. And that someone is me, because I'm a former prisoner. I stole things when I was a kid, and that's what they shoot me for. They shoot me for the bread and gum that I stole when I was 12." But even after the execution, the misfortunes of the unfortunate private did not end. After the fire command, 11 bullets hit him, but the convict remained alive. Immediately on orders, the firing squad began to reload their rifles for a second round. And here even the priest who was present at the execution could not stand it. "Give him another shot if you like it so much." However, while the weapons have been reloaded, Slavic died. He was buried next to a soldier who was shot for rape. Interestingly, as soon as the execution became known in the United States, both Slavic's widow and dozens of other citizens began to seek a review of the sentence. However, until the 19th, all presidents answered with a categorical refusal. Gradually, everyone who petitioned for a review of the sentence passed away. There was practically only one person left: Macomb County Commissioner Bernard V. Kalka. This war veteran did not stop trying to get a review of the sentence. He managed to ensure that already in 1987, U.S. President Ronald Reagan allowed the remains of Slavic to be transferred from France to Detroit and to bury the unlucky deserter next to his wife. Kalka also managed to raise about $5,000 to pay for the exhumation of the body and its delivery to the United States. The story of the only deserter sentenced to death ended only 42 years later, when Edward Slavic finally found peace next to his wife in his native land.